Hi everybody, it's Franny.
And this is Heidi.
And today we're going to bring you the last episode in our 3.2 Carrera project series. Now this is a really important episode. This is all the money we spent on the car. All right, well, Heidi, how much did we spend on the car originally?
We got the car back in 2013. We bought it at an eBay auction, and really we didn't have a chance to go and check out the car at all. But the person selling the car was nice enough to actually talk to Franny so that she was able to ask him some key questions about the car.
Yeah, so I spent about an hour or more on the phone with him. I asked him about rust and leaks and all the things you would ask about a car, and he gave me some more photos and things, and we felt that it was an okay deal, so we went for it at 18 grand.
And we did have it shipped here in, well, I shouldn't say shipped. We did have it transported here in an open top semi, and that was a learning experience for us, and it was a big mistake, and we will never do that again. I think it's just a good idea to have a container closed. It would protect the car no matter what kind of condition it's in.
And the car got here, it was absolutely filthy. It had just been through how many snowstorms and rainstorms? It was a mess.
Yeah, it came from Alabama.
Yeah, from Alabama, so it was an absolute disaster. So step one was to wash the car. Step two was to take the car down for emissions, and during that time I found a few things that needed to be fixed on the car right away. And the first one was the alternator bearing was bad. You could just hear it squealing and rumbling back there. So I pulled the alternator out of the car and we took it to a place called D&D. It's local place. They do classic and sort of vintage electrical work on cars, and they did a great job on it, and threw that back in, and it's been great ever since.
Yeah, we're really lucky. They are only about 10 minutes from here, and I believe that they are pretty well known, you know, nationwide, but it's really nice to have them right in our backyard.
Yeah, it's super convenient. Yep. And so that was about $100. Next step was to replace the windshield. It was really badly pitted, and these cars, the windshield's a little bit difficult to get out and get back in, so if you're going to do one of these G-body cars, make sure that the place that does it knows what they're doing. So that was just shy of $500 or so to get that done.
Now, did that include any of the trim around it?
It was a new gasket, but they used the original aluminum trim. Because that's really expensive and very hard to find, and that's one of the key things about when they take the windshield, the old one out, don't mess up that trim. Yeah.
We had a really nice manager at a Safe Light, and that's where we went. Yeah. And he had actually just been in the business for like 29 years, and he goes, "Oh, I'm going to do this myself."
Yeah, that was great. He didn't want
anybody else to touch it.
And that's exactly what you want with that. So, and then next was the convertible top. The actual top needed to be replaced. And Heidi, why do you think that top needed to be replaced?
Well, we took it to a friend of ours. He really wanted to see the new purchase, and so we took it to a barbecue, and barbecue was outside, but then it got overcast and we thought it might rain, and so we put the top up, and on the way home it started to leak all over.
It was pouring though. Yeah, it was really
raining hard, and we were like, wow, like looking up at the top and thinking that it needed to be replaced.
It needs to be replaced. So they have like a liner underneath them, and it sort of cracks a little bit as the top goes up and down.
There was a liner in it at all.
Well, there's no headliner, but the actual top material itself has a protectant coating in there, and that's
so the headliner was gone.
Yeah, the headliner was completely gone,
and you know, just time. And,
you know what? It was its time.
And it didn't have a boot cover anymore either.
And we didn't have a boot cover for it.
So that was one of the reasons probably why the headliner was gone.
Yeah, so there was about $1,800, and we got the whole top replaced, brand new plastic back window, which is very cool. That comes with the top, obviously, and a new boot cover for it. So that was actually not that expensive for all the work that we got done, I thought.
Yeah, and we went to Auto for that, and Ron is a well-known concours car. He also did Ava, and he really did a nice job.
He did a great job on it. Yeah, totally awesome. The next thing, a couple of things really quick. We went through. We had to get 4 new tires because the tires were shot on the car. It was about $780 or so for that. And then when driving the car, especially up and down our driveway, we heard this clunk in the back, and that turned out to be the sway bar mounts. They did didn't change the actual mounts when they, from the SC, the previous version of this car, to this car, but they increased the actual size of the sway bars, and it puts too much stress on them and they break.
Yeah, so we took that to Eurosport, which is the same shop we showed in either the first or second video of this project car series. Dave Marshall ended up doing the other sway bar mount, and I actually think he had to redo the other one because we had only done one, and it had to do with the fact that our driveway was...
And once one goes, then it'll take the other one, even if it's been redone. So it's a little bit of a mess, back and forth a little bit on that. It's kind of expensive, about $560 or so to get that done, because they actually have to weld in a new bracket and blah, blah, blah. All right, then we had, we had a few things that we needed replaced on the car that were just kind of dumb stuff, like switches, and one of the mirrors was wrong, the glass in the mirror was wrong, and a bunch of different things. And then it was time for a service on the car, so oil change, valve job, all that. So we had all the gaskets and all that sort of stuff we had to do. Oh, and also the CV boots were ripped on the car. Awesome. Right. So I had to pull those off. Now I was able to, the CV joints themselves were fine. I just had to replace the boots. Yeah. And they're actually not that expensive. It's just kind of a labor intensive job.
Right. And
but
that car
to get that done.
At that point would have been about 25 years old.
Yeah.
So definitely this
totally makes sense, right? I did replace the shift coupler. The original shift coupler was pretty worn, and I hate to say this, but I broke it when I was trying to get the bushings out of it. It's pretty common. Unless you have the exact right tool to press that thing out, you'll probably break it. So, and that's okay. The aftermarket one I got actually is much easier to service. So I'm pretty happy with it. So that was kind of a plus. Oh, and then the next thing we did was a fuel pump on it and a fuel filter. The fuel pumps on these, when they go bad, they'll start to whine really bad.
Yeah, it was whining a bunch, and so we would take it to like a PCA event, and it would be whining, and you'd be like, oh, I thought I got that fixed. And how many times did you have to drain the fuel tank?
Yeah, well, I actually didn't drain it too many times, but there was a lot of crud in the tank itself, and there's a screen on the bottom plug, and it had broken off, and so just all the chips and all the crap that was in the gas tank was going directly into the pump, which that was upsetting the pump. And then downstream of the pump is the filter, and then the filter clogged up, which made the pump's life more difficult. It was just a mess. So just clean the tank, replace the screen, replace the pump, and replace the filter, and that really helped a lot. The car was a lot happier after that. Oh, and then the next thing, so Heidi, when you drove the car, when we picked up the car and you drove it down the street here the very first time, what did you hear?
Oh, a bunch of squealing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so what that is there's these little helper motors in the front kick panels for the heating system. Evidently, the heat had been turned on. Heidi didn't notice that when she drove the car.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, because you didn't know. We didn't know. You know, this was our first 911. We'd never owned one. This was our very first one.
I think I expected the worst. I expected the car wasn't even going to run when we pulled it off.
And it did run. It was fine. But there was this squealing going on from just on front of the inside of the car. Turns out those motors, the bearings were just bad on them. And I pulled them apart and I tried re-greasing them, and they would just fail again. They were just worn out, those bushings. So I actually found a full set, both motors shipped from Auto House AZ for just a little over $100, where Porsche wanted $400 a pop for those motors, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, so shop around and you'll find some pretty cool stuff, but it's the exact same Bosch part number from Porsche and from Auto House. So got those done, and they've been silent ever since. So I did upgrade the headlights on the car. It had H5s, which are sort of the rounded ones, and the H4s, the halogens are supposed to be a lot brighter, and they are. I don't particularly like them. They're flat in the front, and I got a comment on the last video about, will you be installing LEDs? And I think that might be something we should look into, would be a set of LED lights for it, headlights.
We should probably do that with most of our cars.
Yeah, we probably
should.
Yeah,
definitely.
So we'll probably end up doing that. But so we replaced the headlights, wasn't that big a deal.
I had driven the car to a PCA event, and I was talking to my friend Chad, who you may have seen in another one of our videos. And we had just gotten this car, so we were pretty excited about it. And I was talking about it and showed him the interior of the car, and he goes, I have an 86 coupe, with the same color interior. And I didn't think much about it, but he said, you know, I'm not using that interior because I've turned my car into a race car.
So we got together with Chad. I had him drive the car. You can see it in the very first episode of this series. And we bought a bunch of stuff from him. We actually bought 4 wheels. So we have these white Fuchs. He had white Fuchs as well. So we bought a full set of those. He had a set of snow tires. That's where those came from.
Right.
So we picked up quite a few parts from Chad, actually. And also in that big lot was some Ferrari parts for the 308. And that's going to be the next series after this episode, actually. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. And we'll take a little break right now to say, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that now and hit the little bell next to it to be notified, because we're done with this car, but we're moving on to the 308, and that's going to be a big deal too. And look for an episode very shortly about what we're going to be doing on that car. All right, so anyway, Chad had a bunch of parts, which was great, and a bunch of 308 parts, and this car. It was awesome. And he was a great resource to let us know that, this is a great segue, that our transmission needed a little bit of help.
Right.
It was bad. The synchros on second and third were kind of shot, and that brought us to the current project, the sort of refresh project that we've just completed.
Right. We figured if we were going to be redoing the transmission that there was other stuff that we could be doing. I mean, there were some items. Franny would be driving the car and something wouldn't sound quite right. And we're just like, you know what? Let's just like sort this car and bring you guys a bunch of videos as well.
Yeah. All right. So to bring you very quickly up to speed on the car, we ended up dropping the engine. We pulled the transmission out, got that rebuilt. Then we went through the engine to check it very carefully. We refreshed all the fuel lines and everything else on the car. We did quite a bit of work there. And once we got the engine transmission back in the car, we turned our sights on the interior and did quite a bit of work on the interior. So, all right, well, let's get into this, Heidi.
Okay.
So
Right. So let's start with the parts. So Auto House AZ, we spent close to $4,000 on the parts, and that was a lot of stuff. Muffler, fuel lines, oil lines, etc.
Tons of stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's just all these bits and bobs, and you'll see them throughout the episodes, the previous episodes and things. But yeah, it was a lot. And yeah, 4,000 sounds like a lot in parts, but it kind of does and it kind of doesn't, I think.
You could double that if you're going to have somebody do all the work on it and everything else. So dent removal, dents by hands, really reasonably priced.
Yeah, only $100 for that. And so he just went through and removed all the dents in the car. They weren't bad, but they were just kind of the one on the hood and in different places.
Now, he only charged us $100, but the way dents by hands works is if you're there for the first time, it's kind of when you pay full price, but repeat customers, he starts dropping down
bringing the price down. Yeah. So we've actually had most of the cars down there.
Exactly.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so Eurosport anti-sway bar mount, the other one that broke. And then, as Heidi said before, once they fixed that one, had to go back and sort of touch up the other one as well, just because it was just starting to kind of break away a little bit. Right. That was another $500. So actually, I think he probably cut us a deal on that.
I think he did. So we had a few. I kind of broke a bolt, and Heidi had to go down to Ace Hardware, so I was like $20 for that. Not bad. But then there was the transmission. So we took the transmission to a place called Stores Garage, downtown Denver.
Really well known, very well respected garage for classic cars, not so much for the newer stuff.
Yeah, perfect for this vintage of car.
Yeah.
And this car is an 86, so it's the last year for the 915 transmission before they went to the G50. And the nice thing about the 915 is that it's a lot less expensive to get rebuilt than the G50s are.
Right.
But you kind of maybe have to rebuild them a little more often, but they're just a lot cheaper. The parts are easier to get. It's a good transmission. And I think the big problem with the 915 that you'll hear is that people just haven't driven one that's been rebuilt. And now, since this one's been rebuilt, it shifts beautifully, actually.
Now, had it been rebuilt before? Because what I understand about our transmission is that it wasn't that bad. So I've heard that they can go up and be as expensive as probably, $4,500, but ours was about half that. It was right around $2,285.
So yeah, you're right, Heidi. Ours was in really good shape and just kind of needed a refresh more than a rebuild. build, which was kind of nice. So, but that was the whole reason for doing the project in the first place. But that went swimmingly and no problems at all. And stores was super awesome. There were a couple of small parts I couldn't find at Auto House. We got one little transmission boot thing, a little rubber booty that I had to get. We got some seat parts off of eBay.
That were the correct color.
Yes.
So I think ours were ours repainted, or maybe they just were faded or something. But
no, they were black, but then somebody had resprayed the seats, and so it had overspray from that on. They were a mess,
right.
And one of them was cracked. So we actually found a set of 4 in the actual maroon color of the interior for the seats. So that was great. That was a heck of a find.
We really couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that was
and
rare and hence
not that bad. What?
Yeah.
175.
Yeah, so that wasn't too bad, but that was a really good find.
Right.
Since we had the engine out of the car, we wanted definitely to replace the fuel lines that were on the engine, and they're very expensive, about $500 or $600 for that set of fuel lines.
And you can't find them, right?
Yeah, well, you can, but you can't find them in the original yellow CAD. So you can find them in the clear CAD, but then they wouldn't look like they did originally. So it took us some work to get that sort of sourced the way we wanted it. But in addition to that, we decided, looking at the other fuel lines on the car, the ones up front and in the back, that, you know what, we need to replace the lines in the tunnel and the fuel lines attached to both sides. So we hooked up with this guy. I found him online. His name's Len Cummins, and he makes a complete replacement kit for the tunnel lines, and then allows you to screw on the soft lines onto the end of those hard tunnel lines.
Right.
Whereas Porsche had them swaged on, which makes it a lot more difficult. So this was a great kit. It was a little bit expensive. What did we pay for? He was about $400 for those lines.
He's good for it, but I was a little bit nervous because he didn't do PayPal, and he would only do like a check or money order, and I was like, oh, I'm never going to see the money again.
Yeah.
But he's good for it.
He is, and we've had several people comment that we talked to about it and sent them on to him, and they were all really happy with him as well.
Right.
His product is killer. It's really good. And then what else, Heidi?
Then we get into the seat covers. The place that we used for the seat covers was highly recommended to me. And also the gentleman that did the install was recommended from a couple of other people who had used him around town. And the one dilemma that I ran into was finding the foam for the seat covers. And we mentioned that in an earlier video, that because of COVID and what was going on, it was really hard to find foam to put into the seat cover. So then we were like, okay, let's just hire somebody who knows what they're doing and can actually build the foam. The seat covers were $1,500, and then the install was $800 for that.
Right, and we had Juan do the install of the actual seats, and then we turned around and used him again to do the actual carpet install.
Carpet and sound deadening.
Yeah, sound deadening. So that was actually kind of expensive because there was material involved with that as well. While all this was kind of happening, and the engine was still sort of in pieces as well, why don't you talk about the powder coating and the ceramic coating?
Right, so that was really challenging. That was right in the middle of lockdown for COVID, and so we had dropped off our parts, and everything was fine to drop them off to get them ceramic coated and powder coated, but because no businesses were allowed to operate, I was having phone calls with Lee. I was supposed to do a shop tour for Lee. I owe you, Lee, still, to show his shop and what
this pristine powder coating.
Pristine, and ceramic coating is really unusual, much more so than just powder coating. So to find a shop that does both, and his does, and reasonably priced, and does a good job, but it was such a challenge because of COVID. And he does actually work with people out of state. He will ship stuff. We'll definitely put his description in our link.
So we had all the tin and all the metal work powder coated.
Right.
And then the exhaust system we had ceramic coated. And it's amazing. The whole exhaust system looks brand new. Saved us a ton of money.
And then, of course, one other thing when we're talking about coating things was we sent a bunch of parts to Van Nuys Plating, and that was only $350, and they did an absolutely phenomenal job that looked just the way they would have looked brand new.
It really, it's amazing. basically restores the parts to brand new, and they
Right.
look amazing when they're done.
Right.
And then you put them on the engine, and it's just total bling. So
Right, and we did that with some of them that
Totally
we
worth
weren't
it.
sure if we'd be able to find the replacement parts from Auto House.
Yep.
So
yeah, we ended up just using the original parts because they were perfect. So it actually saved us a ton of money in
Right.
having to replace hardware, because that was what people were writing in, oh, just replace all the hardware. Well, one, a lot of this hardware you can't get. The standards and things have changed. And then second, it would be very expensive to have to go through and buy all this hardware and
Right.
yeah. So we just
spent almost $4,000 on parts anyway.
yeah, we did.
It
And
would have been more.
totally would have been a lot more. So that was actually a great way to save some money.
It looks original.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
looks the way the car would have looked back in 1986.
Right. So we had a few other little bits and bobs, seat belts and a few other little things that details that we threw
we
in the
bought
car.
seat belts.
Yeah, we bought some seat belts for
Right.
the back. And from all that stuff with Chad, we were able to replace our front seat belts and things. So all of that, all said and done, the refresh came out to $14,467, which sounds like a huge amount of money, but it kind of does and it doesn't in some ways.
Right. We
you
had
know?
spent $7,000 on everything else before we did the refresh.
Right.
So the grand total.
Yes, the grand total, including the $18,000 that we paid for the car.
Right. Was $39,666.
Yep.
So that number is why we did not get the car painted.
Exactly. No,
Right.
no, that's a really good point, because we're sitting at basically $40,000 of
Right.
what we've got into the car. I had a guy, remember the detailing episode? Well, there's a guy who drove by while I was doing that, and he was ready to write me a check for $60,000 for the car right there,
Right.
just like that. And I was like, really?
And we had a guy that was a reference for paint, and he spent a couple hours here looking over the car and telling us we didn't need to do the whole car, but it still was going to be $10,000 to $12,000. So at that point, then we're looking at a cost that probably would have been closer to $55,000.
Right.
Is my guess, and the
No,
car
totally.
is probably worth between $55,000 and $60,000. So we're going to have an appraiser come out next week and let us know what the value is.
And then the car would be so nice, then we'd have to take it down and probably get some protective film put on it and get it ceramic. By the time we got done,
Right.
we would have had more in it than it was actually worth. And at this point, I think we're pretty much in the black, because the cost on these cars has really gone up.
Right.
And
I mean, the one other thing is that, maybe 5 or 10 years from now, if the prices really skyrocket, then that's when you get it
Totally.
painted.
Yep.
When the prices go up and you could afford to paint it. 'Cause
Right.
everything else will be running great.
That brings up a very good point in all of this, and it's a great way to sort of wrap this up, is there's a reason why we did the refresh now and not when we bought the car.
Right.
Because the valuation on the car couldn't support it back then, but it does
No.
support it now.
It does. Yeah, it didn't.
Yep.
For the longest time, we're like, do we keep this car? Do we get rid of it? Do we keep it?
What do we
Blah,
do?
blah, blah.
Yep. But the valuations just couldn't support really a bunch of cosmetic work on the car. So at any rate, now they do, and that's why we got that done. And that's kind of our philosophy. We're not going to just go out and spend a ton of dough on the car when the prices can't support it. Just in case we do need to get rid of the car, we don't want to be in the red. All right, well, that's all the money we spent on the 3.2 Carrera project. Let us know in the comment section below. What do you think? Did we spend too much? Should we have painted the car? Did we
Yeah.
miss anything?
Right.
All right, from here we're going to be moving on to the Ferrari. We've got a lot of work to do on that car.
Right, and
We've-
that's exciting.
We've got all four corners, suspension work. We're going to be doing some interior work,
Right.
some external
You'll
stuff.
see some familiar faces with that interior work.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. And I think a little bit of engine work. So
Right.
that's going to be really good. Well, thank you so much for watching. And as always, a very special thank you to our Patreon supporters. Until next time, safe travels.
Bye.